Welcome to Behind the Line, the podcast where you'll get untold stories from first responders and military veterans. I'm Tim Hegman. I'll be your host. Our guest today is a graduate from the University of Virginia, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts Degree in economics. While attending school, he was a member of the Naval Reserve Officer Training Corps. In 2004, he was commissioned as a Marine Corps officer and served as an infantry officer and reached the rank of captain. While in the Marine Corps, he was deployed twice to Iraq, in 2005 and then again in 2007. While in Iraq, he served with the 1st Battalion, 2nd Marine Regiment. He was a rifle platoon commander and a rifle company executive officer for those deployments. In 2011, he joined the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation as a graduate-level intern with the University of Southern California. He first started volunteering sporadically with the foundation and then began working with them on a more consistent basis. Eventually, he became clinical director last summer after the sudden and tragic passing of their leader and mentor, Kevin Sousa. Our guest enjoys skateboarding, surfing, we're going to go a lot more into that later on, playing tennis, and a passion of mine, trading baseball cards. In addition to all of that, he is also a human performance coach with the Department of Energy's Human Performance Analytics team, as well as a licensed social worker and associate clinical social worker. He and his wife, Agatha, live in Southern California with their 2 children, West and Eva. Please join me in welcoming Nick Borrelli. Nick, welcome to the Behind the Line podcast.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'm really quite honored. It really is an honor. Thank you.
Well, so the audience, appreciate that. I'm honored, and our guests are honored to have you as somebody here that we can talk to about the military and the good work you're doing with the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation and all of that. But so thank you for taking the time to be here.
Absolutely.
Just so everybody knows, even though we're doing this today, this has been a long time coming, right? We've met through a mutual friend, Andy, with Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. He put us in contact, and just both of our schedules have been kind of crazy. And, but I'm thankful that we're here today.
Likewise.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tim.
You're welcome. So, Nick, tell me a little bit about yourself growing up, what you did as a kid and your family.
Sure. So I grew up in a military family. I'm a military brat by trade through and through. My father was a career Marine and actually enlisted in 1979 and went from private all the way to colonel after 33 years. Yeah. So he was a supply guy and then moved into the aviation logistics field. And so I spent most of my younger years in Marine Corps bases, East Coast, West Coast, overseas. And so New Orleans, North Carolina, San Diego, and then back to North Carolina, back to Japan for 3.5 years, and then finished up high school in Virginia. And so that was kind of moving around a lot growing up, living that.
Where were you born? What part of the States?
So I was actually born in New Orleans, Louisiana during Mardi Gras, which it fit well for me, I think.
Not to get sidetracked, I was in the military myself, in the Air Force from 84 to 88. And my last deployment, or last base, I should say, was in Louisiana. And I was in northern Louisiana. I was at Shreveport Air Force Base.
Gotcha.
But I went down to Mardi Gras, and I will say that one time was enough.
I went back when I was in college with the NROTC team, and I think that was probably, I'm good. I'm good on it.
Yeah, I'm okay. Well, good. So what were some of your hobbies growing up as a kid?
I loved playing sports. I really got into skateboarding, probably is one of the earliest memories that I have of getting a skateboard from my uncle, who was kind of a collector / hoarder. And he was in the Merchant Marine Academy. He was too short to join the Navy, even though he tried to join the Navy. All he wanted to do was be on boats and be in the Navy. And so he joined the Merchant Marine Academy, or Merchant Marines, because he couldn't be in the Navy. And I remember distinctly him having lots of tattoos, like sailor style tattoos. He kind of looked like Popeye as well. But he had a skateboard in his garage in Massachusetts, and we would go up to visit Massachusetts for our family vacations. And I had this little plastic skateboard at the age of 4 that I was really enamored with, and immediately skinned my nose, trying to ride it on my knees
Oh
and
yeah.
push
Oh
off.
yeah.
And we had to go to a wedding for my cousin Gary, who was a Vietnam vet, very shortly after that. And so I had scab nose for the wedding. Um, but that I just saw it on ESPN, I think it was, like vert ramp contests in the 80s, that just, I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. And then that kind of segued into surfing and boogie boarding. And I remember being on the East Coast in Atlantic Beach as a kid, going boogie boarding. And my dad used to take me to the Neuse River on Cherry Point, Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point in North Carolina. And we would go boating with a little John boat, and he'd pull me on a kneeboard.
Oh,
Uh, and so like being on the water and moving and standing sideways and catching waves, and like it was something that I just kind of gravitated towards early. And then he got orders to San Diego to work with the Navy on the aviation side. And so we lived here when I was early elementary school. And it was like, I had a old Commodore computer game called California Games
okay.
that had the surfing and skating and BMX and hacky sack, and it was all kind of like before Baywatch, the 8-bit version of Baywatch kind of.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I came out here and was like, oh my gosh, like this is it. Like, why would I ever live anywhere else? So it was that. And then some team sports, baseball. I really liked baseball, and I played that up until I was in probably about high school. We moved to Japan and lived on a base, and we didn't have enough kids to have a league. And so I kind of segued into tennis after that, because you only needed one person to play with. So, but yeah, those are kind of been the activities that have carried me through. And that, even though we moved around a lot, we weren't always near the ocean. It was that idea of like getting back at some point so that I could surf and be in the water and learn to surf, or surf better, or surf as much as possible. That was something that always was kind of in the back of my head growing up.
So how old were you when you started surfing?
Caught my first wave on a surfboard when I was around 9 or 10.
Oh,
I was
wow.
like between like 3rd and 4th grade. And yeah, we lived here in San Diego and Pacific Beach, and we came up to Carlsbad for a weekend event. And my dad took me to a surf shop, found a board that had duct tape all over it. The fin was falling off, and somebody wrote clunker on it, and a lemon. It was like 3 inches thick, and I weighed like 60 pounds or whatever I weighed, and it worked perfectly for me. And I remember, this will be like full circle, but I remember going out by myself, like knee high, getting into the whitewash, getting on a wave, standing up. And I remember, like, as I was doing that, I was riding the wave, and there was somebody next to me, like a guy, an adult, walking out to go surf. And he was like, yeah. And it was like that immediate success and then feedback and validation loop kind of like all hit home. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this was like the best thing ever. And then that started the lifelong love affair / addiction /
And you've been with it ever since?
I've been with it ever since. It's been, like I said, it's been distant at times because of the locations, but it's always been a part of me and my identity, I guess, of wanting to be a surfer, or wanting to live that kind of surf lifestyle, but then actually just wanting to be in the ocean and riding waves. Yeah, it's been a big part of me.
Yeah. Well, good for you, man. So
I've
been doing that for a while, still doing it now. But let's back up. So you went to school. What made you want to join ROTC, number one?
Right.
And then eventually, what inspired you to join the military? Or who inspired you to join the military?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I I kind of grew up not thinking about joining the military, and I was first in my family to go to a 4-year college, and the way my dad and parents presented it was like we lived the way we did so that you could go be a doctor or a lawyer or go to school. Like you don't actually my dad was like, you don't need to join the military. Like you can do whatever you want and you can go to a 4-year college and have a scholarship. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was in high school afterwards. And that was kind of anxiety provoking, but also I did well enough to have opportunities for some money coming in for school and opportunities to go to good schools thanks to my parents and my upbringing and the opportunities that they gave me and the ethics they kind of built into me. So I was actually looking for scholarships, and my friend had gotten an ROTC scholarship or was pursuing one for the Air Force and was like, yeah, I want to be an engineer, but they'll pay for it and they'll do this. And
Yeah.
I kind of was like, whoa. And at the time I really liked working with kids, and I really liked the idea of being a doctor, the idea of being a pediatrician. Like I worked in summer camps as a camp counselor, and I also worked as a party entertainer
Oh,
for
wow.
for kind of
That's
like a
fun.
Chuck E. Cheese kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I really liked acting, and I was into theater as well in high school. And so I was looking at maybe going into acting, and I saw Patch Adams and I was like, oh, that's cool. I could be like that and work with kids and it would be great. And so I kind of had this vision of that. And then I was applying for schools, and growing up, like I had some really great role models, specifically in Japan, some doctors that were friends of my parents, dentists actually, the Schwartzes, and awesome people. And he was a Navy doctor, and I was like, oh well, I could go into the Navy. They could pay for undergrad and overgrad, or med school, or whatever you want to call it.
That's
And
great.
yeah, and so that was the concept. And so I decided to go that route. And it was more like, again, it was selfish. I mean, it was like, okay, they could pay for school. And then it was also like, wow, that's cool. I could be in the military and I could serve my country and also get paid for schooling and go that route and do something good for my community. And then whether I want to stay in or get out, like I could be of service that way. And so that was the plan.
There's a lot
Between
of benefits of what you're speaking to. There's a lot of
Sure,
benefits to that, to doing those.
sure. So that was the plan between 17 and like 18 and a half, 19. That's kind of where I was like, okay, I'll do that. Like that kind of makes sense and sounds right. But
Yep.
but I and so I started that. I got into one semester of pre-med classes at the University of Virginia, and I got my ass kicked. I got, I
Yeah.
got to be quite frank. And I think that it was something that really rocked me. It really, going into school and working hard in high school, and it's kind of like when you're good in a small town at a sport or something, and then they're like, okay, yeah, you could play for the big leagues, and then you go to the
Oh,
big
yeah.
leagues, and then you're like, whoa, like you pitched 3 times faster than everyone
Yeah.
else.
You realize you're not always the all-star.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was, it was also where I just started to feel like I was a little bit challenged in other ways. Like I tried to study, I tried to focus, I tried to really put in the effort, and I was getting like C's and D's, and then I didn't understand the bell curve, and I'd get like a
Oh, yeah.
D on something, but it would be a B, and I was just like, this is. And at the
Too much.
time, I was very stressed about it, and at the time, because the Marine Corps is a branch of the Navy, and in Naval ROTC, the Marine options are part of the Navy ROTC program. I had some older midshipmen who were the older kind of alphas in the Marine option platoon that they heard my story, or they knew that my dad was a Marine or whatever. They saw something in me where they were like, hey, you're going to come with us and start working out with us and start hanging out with us and start wearing green sweats, and like, and then they were slowly brainwashing me into like, you don't
Yeah.
want to be in the Navy. Like, why would you want to do that anyway? You could be with us and be a badass
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff. So um, those were very impressionable years, and I felt really, and not in a bad way, but I felt like very accepted early on by that, and it felt nice. It felt nice to be. I was a very late bloomer.
Mm.
I think I weighed like 118 pounds when I got to college,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, my
Yeah.
roommate at the time was into weightlifting, and we started a thing called Project 140 to get me to to get me up to 140 pounds. I was eating like 6 times a day and go to the
Oh,
gym.
man.
Yeah, so I really wanted to be really masculine and to be accepted by the guys that were that I thought were like the apex predators to be,
Yeah.
and not all of them were in the Marine Corps, but the couple that had like pegged me to be like, yeah, you're coming with us. I was like, cool. Um, so that was the kind of start of it, and then I was really like all in. Like I figured like, okay, well, if I can't be a doctor, or if I don't have the grades to do that, then I could put forth my effort into becoming something great in the military, and then or someone great in the military in some form or fashion. And then after, so the RTC program uh, has you go off for a month after your freshman year to Corps Mid, so the core training for midshipmen. And I pushed really hard to go to the West Coast, even though I was like, you go to Quantico, Virginia and Norfolk, Virginia, or you could go to the West Coast, but you kind of have to live on the West Coast to go to the West Coast
Oh,
one. And I was like, even though I lived in Virginia and it was in Virginia, I had figured out a way with some summer classes and then some other family issues and things that were happening to go out to the San Diego, because I just want to get back to San Diego and surf and be near the ocean. And so I did that, and we spent a week at Camp Pendleton with the Marine Corps after doing the other Navy stuff, which was really cool. But the Marine Corps, that at that point, I was like, man, yeah, I want to do this. And I wrote my dad a really long email and put our Corps in the subject line,
oh,
and told him like, hey, I really want to do this. And so I kind of put forth all my efforts into joining the Marine Corps after that. And that was that was the summer of 2001. Like
wow.
August, yeah, July, August 2001, and then September 11th happened. And my father was stationed at the Pentagon, and
Oh, wow.
he was in the Pentagon when it was hit, and I was in Charlottesville. It was a Tuesday because it was a drill day. We're all in our uniforms, and I remember. I know it sounds weird, but I always remember like seeing the towers get hit on TV downstairs in Maury Hall, where our lounge was, the ROTC building, Navy ROTC building. And I remember thinking like, man, like they're going to hit the Pentagon. Like this is like not like, this is like the real deal. Like this is going to happen in a bunch of places. And that was crazy. And I remember having a flip phone and there was no service. And I talked to my MOI, and I was like, I think I got to drive home and just check on my dad and make sure that my family's okay. And it was about 2-hour drive from where we lived to Charlottesville. So, and then pretty shortly after that, it was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Like, I think I need to be part of this. I already am. And so it was like,
You were just more motivated. I mean, like you knew this is where I'm going.
It solidified that identity for me, of being really motivated and having the haircuts and wanting the stickers and being like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to be in the Marine Corps. Yeah. And I would joke with my dad, like, but I want to do the real Marine Corps and be in the infantry. And, because well, for a lot of reasons, but I felt like that was like who was grooming me to join and what the Marine Corps exists to do, and to be a leader of Marines and to be a leader of Marines on the ground, on the battlefield, was something that felt like, well, what's more masculine than that, I guess, or what's more noble, or what's more fill in the blank, I guess, as playing with GI Joes growing up. I think it kind of was like, oh, like, yeah, that's what you should do.
And you knew, yeah. So you were deployed to Iraq twice. That was 2005, 2007.
Correct. Yeah.
And then each time you went, I know you and I spoke briefly about this, but
right.
Number one, what was your mission when you went each time? And when you were there, were you involved in any combat, any critical incidents? Well, let's start with that. Any combat or any critical incidents? And what was your role when you were there both times?
Thank you for asking. Yeah, it's such a spectrum. And this has always been a really interesting component of my work with veterans and my own work with myself, and just understanding the complexities of what we do, and what happens next afterwards. So I was a rifle platoon commander with an infantry unit that was part of a battalion landing team that was with a Marine Expeditionary Unit. And the timing of my deployments in that unit were as such to where end of 2005 was the Marine Corps was trying to get back to like, hey, we can be in Iraq and operating, but also going back to doing what the Marine Corps does with like the Marine Expeditionary Units. Like, we could go do traditional MEU floats, is what they call them, where they take all the ships and they go around to the West Pac or the East Pac, and they are the 911 forces for on call in case something happens, whether it's humanitarian or environmental or whatever the case. So we were part of that, to where prior to that, we were flying over to Iraq, spending 6 to 8 months or 10 months or whatever, flying back. And they were like, no, we're really going to we're going to go on ships, and we're going to do a workup, and we're going to train, like, you're going to be the helo platoon commander. And so we did a lot of like helo-borne operational training, where we were like in helicopters, me and the platoon, and putting together raid packages and things like that, and doing all that training to go and train other allied forces in different parts of Europe or wherever we were going to go, or the Far East or wherever. And then we got on boats, we sailed over to the Middle East, we got into Kuwait, and then we went into Iraq. And I think originally we were supposed to be there for like 30 days or something really, really short. And then that got extended. And then we pushed again for another extension. We spent some time in Kuwait on the front end and on the back end, but we were operating out of the hit area near Al Assad, and my platoon had actually been taken from my company and been put in support of the MU, and we were given a bunch of gun trucks, and we operated almost like a mobilized like a cat platoon where we were all mobile. So we did very little foot patrolling at my platoon, and we just spent some time in Al Assad. We did all kinds of stuff. Like we did convoy security escorts. We did mobile patrols we did route clearing missions. We did like Overwatch stuff. We had to do like convoy escorts with all these 18 wheelers, like convoying through the country, just like big giant sitting targets. It was,
I was gonna say, yeah,
yeah,
you can't hide.
it was all kinds of stuff that they gave us, stuff to do, like go check out dead bodies under a bridge, things like that. But I guess I say all that because I say all that because it wasn't nearly as kinetic as I thought it was going to be. Coming off of, I had friends that were killed in action from infantry officer course. I had friends that were in Fallujah just a year before that had taken tons of casualties in their platoon. Like, I think that we had all really anticipated, and not to dumb down what anybody in my unit did but I just, I had inherited my platoon from a really close friend of mine now, who had spent 7 months in Iskandariyah, which was like the triangle of death. And they had lived like hermits under a bridge for a while, some of the company guys, and they'd seen a lot of like firefights and a lot of, and they had like the old Humvees that weren't completely up armored. And so, yeah, I remember like my first deployment almost coming home. And so we didn't get into a lot of firefights. Like we got hit with IDs, and we got like a lot of sucker punch kind of stuff. And it was really just frustrating, like really frustrating. And so like my truck got hit with an ID that was probably, there were mortars and things like that. And I had my turret gunner got a little bit injured. But that was like really frustrating because, it's like getting hit in a concert or something. And like, you turn around and like, everybody's like, I don't know what happened. What happened?
Yeah.
It's like somebody, and so that was really tough. And again, I think I like wrote to you about it. Like, I was more pissed than anything else and frustrated. And then I saw my best friend the next day, who was a platoon commander in the company next to me. And he was like, man, I heard that boom last night. And I was like, we just lost 4 Marines. And I was like, he's like, it shook the walls of my firm base. And I was like, whoa, like it felt how it felt for us, but we all like kind of walked away from it for the most part, pretty unscathed. And so that was like, when he said that, I just kind of brought it home quickly of like how you start to just go into operational mode, and especially even if things are kinetic, whether they are or they're not. And so like that kind of humanized it more. Like, he's like, yeah, dude, that was so gnarly. He's like, it was so loud and like intense from our train station. And just kind of thinking about that, like the mortality and the fragility of, and like, I think that was probably like the first time somebody came really close to killing me.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't really get to say that. Hopefully more humans than not ever have to say that, but when you think about it from like a psychological perspective of like, wow, somebody actively tried to take my life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily personal or whatever, it was like, all right, like this, as much as you want to talk about it and train for it, and it kind of put a lot of things into perspective. And so, my second deployment, we were in Rupa, which is the kind of closest town in Western Iraq, in the Al Anbar province near the Syrian border. And so, a big smuggler's town. And again, we did a lot of raids, and I was the rifle company XO there. So I was kind of on the base, or on our firm base when we were operating patrols out of our firm bases. And we had like firm bases around the perimeter of the city and in the center of the city. And we had inherited those from another unit who had inherited those from another unit. And we lived and operated out of an old British fort that had been installed there in the early 1920s, I think it was. And so we trained Iraqi police, and we did patrols with the IAs, the Iraqi army and the Iraqi police force. And that was interesting as well. But I would say, like, I think what was hardest for me at that time was like wanting to, this like kind of selfish frustration of like, again, getting that kind of like, there's no end to this, like it doesn't matter how much or how many bad guys we capture or kill, or like, it just feels, part of me feels like really helpless. And like, it's almost like training to go to the Super Bowl, and then like, whether you win the ring or whether you throw the winning touchdown or whether you sit the bench, like chances are you're going to probably want to go right back in and start training for the next Super Bowl. And so I remember being really young and feeling like almost like jealous of my counterparts who had been in all of these really kinetic, intense, long-lasting battles, and we were more in this kind of like sustaining ops where we were transitioning in to training and supporting and trying to hand off more responsibilities. And that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think sometimes with any war, you're in the military, and there's some guys soldiers, Marines, airmen, who just don't see combat, and they have a different role.
Right.
And there's, what you're talking or speaking about is, I understand your disappointment. You trained for all these events, but you're now doing some other things that you were like, well, I didn't really train for this. But what you did, certainly, I mean, I know you know this, maybe not at the time, served a purpose.
Right.
And there was a need for what you guys did.
Right.
And I mean, just the fact that you and all the Marines were there doing it, you guys need to be commended for that, because not everybody did it. And the fact that you volunteered and did your duty, that's a huge deal. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for saying so. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so a lot has been talked about, and you and I spoke about this early on in our conversations when we first met, about what people in combat, the military, experience, and just the carnage that people, you realize, didn't know people did that to other people,
right?
Or didn't know that was going to happen to my friend, or
right.
It doesn't have to be a friend, just a human being,
right?
Didn't know that was even. It's shocking. So we talk about PTSD and people in law enforcement, first responders, firefighters, certainly the military. Did you see that with some of the people you were deployed with, and maybe afterward? Not necessarily when they were there, but let's say when you came home, did you see people who had lasting effects, some of your friends or people, acquaintances that were in combat, that you saw how they were dealing with it or not dealing with it?
Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, myself included, I think that's why I segued into the work that I segued into like, okay, I don't want to be in the military anymore, because I feel like I'm going to be on that kind of addictive path of like, it's never enough. I need to do more deployments, or I need to go, do more things. And that it felt more self-serving,
Right.
like I I didn't get the Super Bowl ring that I wanted, or I didn't get to throw the touchdown. It felt more like that for me than like, um, I'm here because we're making the world a better place, or I'm here because I I I know that I have an impact on Marines and sailors and men and women that I can be of tactical proficiency or of some sort of leadership proficiency. Like I just realized that I wanted to figure myself out and understand like my motivations behind joining, or understand my motivations, or better understand like why I didn't feel very good, or why I felt angry, or why I had wanted to drink so much. Or yeah, it just felt like a lot of my friends were really suffering, and a lot of Marines were suffering. It's interesting you asked me about like carnage or some of the worst things that had happened. Like there were so many, we had these accidental deaths, like in training. We had suicides, like one suicide on deployment, from a Marine. And like, just like having friends that were in charge of these men and women that had to like literally and figuratively clean up the mess of that, and like what that does to the burden of command, that feeling of guilt, that weight. And I felt again, like almost like if I, like in some ways I was really fortunate to not have that as much as some of my friends and colleagues. And so it felt like this obligation to like, well, how can I be of service still without having to wear the uniform? I want to grow my hair out and surf, but I also want to do something good and figure out like how to feel normal again, and because what we considered normal was I knowingly not healthy, but this acceptable way to cope amongst one another. And is a really isolating thing. PTSD, I think, is a really isolating thing that feels like a lot of shame and a lot of guilt associated with that, because you're not strong enough to handle it. And I think that that's something that I still hear from first responders and from hospital workers and from people of service that deal with carnage, that deal with the tragic loss of life, or that deal with the worst capabilities of humanity, and see the effects of it. And so I think like, yeah, that was like, I know that I had to kind of force kinetic nature for myself. Like I never like fighting and being really aggressive and hurtful was something that I felt like I needed to do or wanted, but then actually doing it didn't feel as good as I thought or natural as I thought. And so I was like, okay, well, I want to go the other way, and I want to figure out where that feeling comes from, but also try to give people like myself and others permission to not have to feel so obligated to do that, and like also try to heal. Because I think it feels really isolating, and I saw a lot of that with us, and I still do.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, as an individual, to deal with that, did
Yeah.
surfing help you? And just you speaking specific to you,
Yeah,
did surfing help at all?
absolutely. And we were in North Carolina surfing some pretty terrible waves where we were located. And also it didn't matter. It was like, I remember being on ship in training exercises and feeling the swell and being like, I can't wait to get back and jump in the ocean. And it helped me, and it still helps me. And I think because talking about that validation before of like, you try something hard, you succeed, and then somebody cheers for you right away. It was like I get that feeling or close to that feeling, and it's as distilled down to the lowest common denominator as close to that joy and pure love and bliss and just peace. Like it's the stoke, it's that I get that feeling like every time I get on a wave, and it feels, and now I'm very privileged to like share that and see that happen for other people. And so, yeah, it helped me a lot. And it was the catalyst for me to leave the East Coast and come out here to California, and transition out of my Marine Corps career, to take orders here. Like I knew in my heart of hearts that I needed to get back to this coast, and I needed to get back to this ocean and these waters, and almost like come full circle to like re-baptize myself into that childlike joy again. So yeah, that was my, after my time with the infantry units, I took orders to come out here and work with the depot, so that I could get out here, and so I could figure out, all right, what's next for me, and so I could get into the ocean as much as possible. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, good deal. So I appreciate you sharing that. So, I'm in the, we're in Southern California, the two of us. I'm
Right.
north of you. I'm in Manhattan Beach. And, being in Manhattan Beach, I knew a little bit about the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. I
Right.
had read about it. I am involved in our Rotary Club here, where we've, for youngsters at the high school, raised money one time, and I should say a couple times,
Thank
that
you.
we gave to Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. So I knew a little bit about it. And one of our guests here early on in this podcast was a gentleman who was is a Vietnam veteran, Pef Ike, and such a cool dude. I mean, that guy, and you and I talked about him, mutual friend. That's a guy you can just hang out with and listen to him play guitar, maybe have a few drinks with, whatever, just, hang out.
Right.
So when I had him on, we talked about what he did at the Marine Corps base, Camp Pendleton, with Marines, surfing, and specifically about the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. It really piqued my interest. And I knew I wanted to learn more about that based on what Pef talked about.
Right.
I've had the opportunity, the privilege to meet Nancy Miller, her husband. And anyway, so enough of me talking about that. But just real quick, who was Jimmy Miller? So our audience knows. And then
Yeah,
we'll talk more about the foundation.
of course. Jimmy Miller is a man who was a waterman. He was a surfer, family man, was raised in Manhattan Beach, lifeguard of 15 years, and lived for the stoke of surfing, lived for the ocean, and wanted to share that, and did share that with underprivileged kids, members of the community, wanted to share that with as many people as possible. And Jimmy also had mental health issues, and surfing, I think, was his source. That was his outlet. That was his holy grail. And he had a lot of life issues happen kind of all at once, combined with a shoulder injury that Nancy had talked to me about, and this is on our website and everything, and coupled with all of the life events that had happened with the injury to his shoulder had kept him out of the water and basically taken away his positive coping mechanism. And with this undiagnosed mental illness, it spiraled really rapidly. And Jimmy took his life by suicide in 2004, unfortunately. And it was just such a shock to the community, and such a devastating blow, obviously, to the family and to the community of Manhattan Beach, for him being who he was for the community. And so the family and the community put together the foundation in honor of Jimmy. Jimmy had started Camp Surf to bring inner city kids into the beaches to come surf, and had done a lot for sharing the love and stoke of the ocean to the community. And the family wanted to continue that legacy for him. And so they stood up the foundation in 2005, and through a mutual friend in about 2007, 2008, had been introduced to bringing surf therapy to the Wounded Warrior Battalion at Camp Pendleton, because the CO, Greg Martin, at the time was like, I want to get these Marines out. They need to be out. Be out of their barracks. They need to be outside. They need to be doing stuff so that they feel good. So they move their bodies and do stuff. And he was like, do you want to go? Do you want to take them surfing? This is all before me, so I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
But,
Sure.
But from what I've been told, like, would you come to take them surfing? Excuse me. And that started the relationship with Camp Pendleton and the Wounded Warrior Battalion. So the active duty battalion that exists to support the wounded, ill, and injured Marines and sailors who were injured in or out of the line of duty, that can no longer do their day jobs, whether it's infantry or admin or logistics or some sort of support or pilot, whatever. And their goal now is to go to this battalion and to heal. And it's to heal to either get back into the fight in the Marine Corps or to transition out and be of service and be of practicality in our society outside of the military. And so they've been working. Actually, the foundation is still working with the battalion. Here we are all these years later. I think what is that, 18 years later now? And we're 19, it'll be 19 this year. And so, yeah, that's been a really beautiful long-term partnership. And that's actually where I was introduced to the foundation back in 2011.
Got it. Yeah, phenomenal work. What Pef shared, and then doing some research about that. So, what is the program called, and for the military, and what is a day like for that program with the Marines?
Sure. So that's our military ocean therapy program. It's written on the hat.
There you go.
That's how I remembered. Yeah, that's our limited edition hats there.
That's right.
But that's our military ocean therapy program, and really what it is this combination of exposure therapy, this combination of group with a talking circle, and outdoor experiential therapy, recreational therapy. It's I like to say, to use a Marine Corps term, it's a combined arms effort of healing, where we work with members of the Wounded Warrior Battalion. They come out every other Tuesday between March and November, and conditions permitting, and we get on the beach, we circle up, we get wetsuits divvied out and gear divvied out, and then we do a talking circle with a therapeutic theme or concept. And it could be something as simple as, like, let's talk about fear today. And I love metaphors. I love acronyms. Acronyms probably from the Marine Corps times. And so we draw in parallels from how surfing and being in the ocean relate to life. And I think that my Marines 20 years ago would say that I was doing that back then, or 18, 19 years ago, still relating life to surfing and relating combat experiences to surfing and riding the wave, or getting, pummeled by the whitewash or getting held under. But we introduce a therapeutic theme. We talk about it. We talk about goals for the experience. And then we set the members up with a trained surf instructor and or volunteer that's familiar with how to provide surfing instruction. And so every athlete that we work with is paired with somebody who will guide them through getting on a board, getting into a wave, popping up, if that's what they want to do. And some people just want to sit in the sand and talk. Some people want to just kind of get their feet wet. Some people just want to watch or boogie board. but we give people the opportunity and we try to meet them where they're at so that we can provide them with the best experience possible of just being outdoors, being connected, and being able to be vulnerable and courageous and sharing what's going on in their life if they choose to do that. Usually it's easier to do that after the session because they've had whatever triggers or stressors are inside them, their bodies, they're able to get out by moving in the ocean and getting thrashed by a couple waves and then feeling the success of getting, guided into a wave and then coming out the other side going, wow, I did that. Like it's a really humbling experience to be connected with the ocean like that, even as a surfer of 3 decades now. So
Yeah.
1 foot or 10, I could still be very humbled by the ocean at any point in time. And so it's nice to be able to give people permission to try new things and to be good at not being good and to just have fun and to give that joy and share that joy and that ability to have that joy. It's amazing how people will open up and share and process and move through their own stressors or tribulations or issues, and just give people permission to forget that for a moment and just be focused and in the moment and have to actually focus and be in the moment in order to accomplish something like that.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Personally, for you, just a ballpark, or maybe how many ocean therapy sessions have you participated in?
I don't know. I'm not the best at accounting and metrics. So, man, well, I'll tell you, I transitioned out of the Marine Corps in 2010.
Okay.
And I went right into a graduate level program for mental health studies and Master of Social Work program at University of Southern California. And in my second year of internship, I was assigned to the Wounded Warrior Battalion at Camp Pendleton as a clinical intern. And I got the opportunity my second semester to participate in Jimmy Miller's surf and ocean therapy as a graduate level intern, fresh out of the Marine Corps, looking for my next phase in life. And I was like, and actually the first one I ever went to was on my birthday. It was February 8th. And right the day before we had Heidi Kraft come in. She wrote an amazing book called Rule Number 2 about being in the trauma units overseas, and just a phenomenal human being. She came and talked, and she was talking about surf therapy and how it exists. And there's an organization that does it with the battalion. And it was like the next day, basically, I had gone out to Camp Pendleton Beach on base and worked with the foundation. And it was my birthday, February 8th, and they were celebrating Nancy Miller's birthday because her birthday is also February 8th. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And she was like, whoa, you look like Jimmy. And I was like, well, that's crazy. And this feels like where I need to be right now. And there was this weird blurring of I'm helping out, but I also feel like I'm getting so much for this, and I could easily be on either side of the coin. And it was a really cool thing. So that was 2011 is a long answer to your question. And I was sporadically involved with the foundation after that as a volunteer. And then Balboa Naval Medical Center started a surf and ocean therapy program for physical rehabilitation at Wounded Warrior Battalion. And I got to be volunteer for that for a while. And so I've had my hand in ocean therapy sessions for the past 13 years now. And so I would say hundreds, probably more, but I want to really be humble about it. It's just the greatest gift that I've been given is the ability to share that stoke with people. So I don't, we do between 15 and 20 sessions a year with Camp Pendleton alone. And then we do 12 sessions a year down here in San Diego with veterans. We did one yesterday with veterans here in Carlsbad. And then we're we're only growing. I don't do all of the sessions at the foundation. We have a cadre of licensed mental health professionals that lead those. But it's a true honor. So yeah, I've done a lot of them, and each one is so, it's like riding a wave. It's like you can get the muscle memory, you can get the experience, and you can know how to navigate roughly, but everyone is different. Everyone brings something amazing to the table. Everyone, you have to really be in the moment and really engage with the audience and meet them where they're at. And it's a collective, kind of wonderful thing. So,
out of all those sessions,
yeah.
what percent of the participants have never surfed? That was their first time. If you could guess.
That's a great question. So I'd say well over half. I mean, the unique thing about the Camp Pendleton program is that we get a lot of folks that after their first session, they come back because we offer it to them twice a month. And that's rad because we give people the opportunity to have a lifelong skill and be part of a lifelong community. It's like the Kelly Slater said it and Step Into Liquid. It's like, once you're in, you're in. It's like the mafia. So like, and like yesterday, for example, we had a Navy veteran. He came, it was his first time surfing, and we didn't really even have waves at the high tide when we showed up, but we were giving him a lesson on land, and somebody was already out there and paddled out with one of our volunteers, and dolphins just started swimming right next to them, like frolicking. And we were like, look, check it out. Like, this is happening right now, even though there's no waves, check this out. Like, so then he was just so excited to even get a chance to paddle to the outside, which sometimes you can't do because of the conditions, and then go searching for dolphins. And we had talked to his wife afterwards because she came and she's pregnant with their first child. And we were like, hey, I'm sorry that he's probably hooked on surfing now for the rest of the year. Or maybe not, but again, like it's something that we do see a lot of first timers, and it's awesome. It's so awesome to take their experience and be able to give them the space to feel safe, to feel trusted, to feel vulnerable in trying something that is really, really difficult. And that's where we get post-traumatic growth. Like, that's where we need each other. Like, we need each other to heal, and we need each other to feel safe, and we need each other to go, you're going to suck. It's okay. I'm not very good either. It's fine. Like, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm still going to fall off my board, and it's going to hit me in the face. And I'm probably, it happens. It happened to me last week. So don't worry. Like, it's okay. So it's so cool to give people that permission, and then also see their physiology change, like after being in the salt water, like after being in the sunshine, after having permission to fail and like be celebrated for it, and also just have the permission to feel like a kid and do something fun.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Can you share with us people that have experienced that program? When they're done, it could be immediate feedback. It could be days after or some time after, from a participant or maybe a family friend, a spouse. Can you share a couple, if you have any, like some of how it made them feel, and just the positive feedback of what you guys did for them, and how they felt, as though they were in good company and willing to trust you guys and take that step?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I think,
or is there a common theme for some of the responses?
I think it gives people agency. And I think that's one of the primary goals of healing and of therapy. Is we had somebody that we're working with, and what I really liked about this example was that his wife had articulated, like, he really likes this because it's something he can do. It's not like you go to a physical therapist or you go sit with a therapist one-on-one and it's really stressful. Like, when I go to my therapist, sometimes I'm still I'm like, oh man, I've got so much to catch up on.
Yeah.
I've only got 50 minutes. Like, what am I going to focus on, or what goals do I want for this session? And what am I going to take away? What's going to happen in this context of 50 minutes? Or like, you go to a physical therapist and they give you these tools to do so that one day you can get good enough to, or healthy enough to go, kick a soccer ball or whatever. And it's like, this is awesome because I don't have to do that. It's like, whatever your abilities are right now, we're going to work with you and we're going to meet you where you're at with those abilities. And we're going to get you in the water. Like, you don't have to wait. Like, you go right now and we'll be there for you. We'll be there with you. And the coolest thing is to see that evolve, either like to get, like, when you're in the mafia and they're sending you messages like, hey, what do you think about this board? Like, I'm thinking about getting,
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah.
like, is this a good board if I'm going to go, where should I surf on my off time, or where should I surf when I'm by myself? Or when you start to see people look forward to the future and not isolate as much, or want to make themselves out in public doing something, I think that that's amazing feedback. And it's also, I also love it when people don't gravitate to surfing. Like, I love it when they're like, and I wouldn't say it happens often, but if we always give people permission. Like, listen, this is my jam. I love this.
Yeah.
And I don't always love it, but if it's a catalyst to get you passionate about something in life, or to look inward and go, yeah, I used to love collecting baseball cards when I was a kid. You know what? Why can't I do that right now? Like, I could totally do that right now. I could get a Beckett from, like, and I could be like, whoa, they still exist. That's awesome. Like, whatever your surfing is, go do it. Like, that's the stoke. That's what's going to fill your cup, and get you out of that negative headspace. Like, get up and go move towards something. And I think that that's been the greatest gift of working with the foundation, is to give people, especially the Camp Pendleton folks. I see myself in all of them, like it's so easy for me to put myself in their shoes,
Sure,
without making it about me, and just try to really live in their experience and be like, here's somebody who joined the military for something. Like I talked about, going to the Super Bowl. And it's like, they're in Wounded Warrior Battalion. If they're in Wounded Warrior Battalion, they probably, I don't know anybody who joins the military going, you know what, someday I really want to end up in the Wounded, Ill, and Injured unit and fighting for my career, or fighting for my life, or fighting for a limb, or trying to learn how to live without an arm or a leg, or part of my brain that controls my emotions, or whatever. So to really sit with that population in that circle, and to also have folks like you and folks like Jimmy and volunteers and people who are not first responders, or maybe their family members were, like, that's the combined arms effort of healing that's so amazing, because there's this always fit that PTSD puts you in that isolation feeling of nobody knows what my experience is like. And there's that immediate circle of trust that's like, listen, I don't know what your story's like. When I say I put myself in their shoes, I still don't know what their story's like. Like, they might think that I relate because I was in the Marine Corps, and I understand to some degree, but you tell me what your experience is like. Tell me how scary it is to be 20, halfway through your military service, and you're getting processed out because of an injury. And now you're like, I don't even know if I'm going to get benefits, or what that's going to look like. I thought I was going to have this golden career and retire 20 years. And now I have no idea. what now? And so to be able to just give people permission to take a break from that and to do something fun, I think opens the doors up to possibility of going, yeah, I'm a therapist. Like I'm a clinical social worker that gets to take people surfing for therapy, and that exists. And that didn't exist when I was a kid, and that didn't, exist when it was like in its infancy stages when I was in grad school, and now here we are. So you could do whatever you want, like use your opportunities and don't deny yourself the opportunity to live your truth, but you have to see it in play. And I think what's cool is when people are supported by the community and the volunteers that show up time and time again and say, hey, you're going to fall on this wave, it's okay.
Yeah,
everybody does, but I'm going to get you back out there, and you're going to do it again until you don't want to, or until you're tired, or until you succeed. I got you. It's like it gives people that spark of like, well, if I could surf, it's almost like if I could be in the Marine Corps, I could do anything. But then when you get injured and you're in a battalion like that, sometimes you're like, well, I don't know if I could do anything now. What can I? And so I think it kind of re-sparks people, is what I've seen, and ignites that fire for them, and that stoke,
Yeah. How about thank you. I love that. What about you personally? I mean, obviously you keep going because, you love surfing. You're a veteran, your profession. But what is some of the feelings for you when you see somebody take a chance based on the trust that you've built with this person in the program? What is some of how do you feel? I mean, what touches your heart when you see something or you hear something and you go, this is why I do that?
All of it. I mean, I'm thinking about it now, is like, it's so powerful, it's like, yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think it comes down to like the ability to give people more than just surfing, and like also package it in a way that I call it ninja therapy. Like, it's like, hey, we're not going to do therapy, but we're going to do therapy.
Right.
And yeah, it moves me so much because, I've battled with my own anger, my own issues. I just lost a friend to suicide. And he was a Marine fighter pilot. And part of the reason why this podcast has taken its time, so thank you for allowing me that space. I lost a client to suicide when I was at the vet center. So I was a full-time counselor for the VA for about 2 years while I was working with Jimmy Miller, and then moved into this director role. And Jimmy was a surfer. All three of them had taken their lives the same way, actually. And all three of them were surfers. And I had always, and I think about it like, well, all three of them had never done this kind of work, and I had tried to get my friend and my client to these circles and to this kind of these meetups where we go deep and we hit some heartstrings and we talk about things that aren't easy to talk about, and we surf, and I'm not saying that they would have been enough to save them, but also it goes back to like what I think about when I think about Jimmy's story, where like, yeah, surfing is one thing that can help. And also it does take that combined arms effort. Like healing is a constant process. Like forgiveness for yourself is a constant process. It's like in Buddhist ideology. It's like achieving enlightenment is not like you work towards it and work towards it and work towards it, and you're on that path, and then you hit enlightenment, and then you're just living enlightened all the time. Like I could like, like
Right.
I just walk around enlightened. It's like nope. It's like then now chop wood, carry water, like back to work.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's so hard about life, right? It's like you can forgive and you can heal, and then some days the swell picks up and the swell of life is overhead and it knocks you on your ass. And if you don't have more than one way of handling that, then something like surfing gets taken away from you, and it's like that's it,
Yeah.
or so I just giving people permission in these sessions to like to work through shame and to live without shame. I think that that's a huge component of post-traumatic stress disorder, is that moral injury, or childhood trauma or sexual trauma, that of like, what does it say about me? Like at the core of my being, I don't feel like a good person, and nothing I can do will ever be enough. And I think that so many people who join the military join because they don't feel good enough. And then there's something about their life that isn't whole. In my case, it was an extra 40 pounds and,
Right.
and hitting puberty at the age of 26. So it was like, the Marine Corps infantry was like, oh, well, I'll fill that, I'll fill that gap.
Yeah.
And so when you look to something like an organization or a title or a rank or a deployment or a combat action ribbon to fill that hole, when it happens and you still don't feel like that hole is filled because inherently you don't feel good enough, then I think then that's where we fall into those spirals of nothing is ever going to fill, no wave, no rank, no amount of deployments is ever going to fill that void. And so giving people permission in these sessions, in these talks, in the water, to just like spark that and be like, hey, like it's okay to want more for yourself and you're enough. Like let's try to fill that. Let's try to stop using shame as a tool in your toolkit, and you and use discernment and maybe use accountability
Mm-hmm.
and use discipline, but not shame yourself into I'm a piece of, or I'm a bad person or whatever it is. Like, because that's where when we take away these coping mechanisms, if there's only have one to go to, but we don't feel safe enough to say, hey, I'm hurting right now, that's when we do things, like that really have really long-term damaging effect. That's when we take our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when we hang ourselves, and that's a horrible, horrible thing.
Well, I appreciate you being so open and sharing that.
I appreciate you listening.
So that's important, and it's going to reach a lot of people when this is published out there. Um, when we produce this out in a couple weeks. So when we talk about the military, the Marines, the ocean therapy program, and just not to bore you or the audience with what I'm going to say here, but I heard Nancy speak one day, and she talked about the ocean therapy program, and I'd heard about it, and I read about it. I heard about it first through PEF, and then I read about it. But then, seeing Nancy for the first time and hearing her, I'm retired military. I was military. I'm retired law enforcement after 33 years in law enforcement.
Thank you.
And I have such respect, not because I was in those professions, certainly not because of me, but I see what the military they do, and I see what law enforcement does. And I know there's a lot of PTSD. And back in the day when I first started, there weren't a lot of options if you were involved in a critical incident or you witnessed a horrific scene. You dealt with it different ways. And there was that stigma where you wanted to keep it to yourself because if you sought help, you appeared to your peers as maybe being weak.
Totally.
And
they can't trust you.
Exactly. Yeah. That's one of it. And one of the reasons. And so, anyways, it's gotten so much better. Wellness for first responders really has progressed so well, where now people are open to it. It's fantastic. So I heard Nancy speak, and I went up to her afterward. And I introduced myself, and we talked briefly. And I'm like, this program you have you ever thought about doing it for first responders? And because I think it really would help first responders. And we just went and had this, I gave my little pitch of why I thought it would be beneficial. And she says, you know what? We've actually talked about that. And this was before this year. This is probably like, I don't know, October of last year, 2023. And so we kind of connected. Well, we did connect. And then she put me in contact with Andy. And he and I have communicated a lot. We've been on a number of Zoom calls together. We've been on phone calls one-on-one together. We've been in group sessions on Zooms.
Yeah.
And he's done so much in Nancy and the whole foundation for what they're going to do. So the first session for first responders is going to be next Saturday, which I think is the 16th of March. I think it's the date, in Manhattan Beach.
Yeah.
I feel fortunate because I'll be there, and I'm just going to be a support guy. Andy's like, hey, we're going to get you a wetsuit. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I just tell me where to put the tables, the water, whatever you need, and I'm going to do that. So, but I say all that because the fact that Jim Miller Memorial Foundation already had that planned or in their mind for a future program, and then the first one's going to be next week. I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to that. And with that, you and you'll be there.
I'll be there.
You'll be there, and we'll meet for the first time, in person. I'm really looking forward to that.
Me too.
So it's going to be, I'm excited to be involved in whatever I can do to help out in a supporting role.
Well, I also, you told me that your background was skateboarding. And so you might low key get pressured to get a wetsuit on and go.
You never know. You never know. Yeah. Skateboarding was my thing growing up. Just a lot of skateboarding as a kid, but yeah, we talked about that.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. I'm still skating and that's interesting too, because that, again, like I said, if surfing's not your jam, then let's find something else. And also, whatever it is that gets you thinking like, oh, I don't want to drink the night before because I want to get up early and go surf, or I want to eat healthy, or I want to do this as long as possible, and I want to preserve my body and my mind and my soul because I have a family and I have a profession, and I also have this really awesome outlet that I love to do or partake in that I want to do for as long as possible because it gives me great joy. And so that's also, what we want to provide people with, whether it's surfing or whether it's mountain climbing or whether it's like unplug, get back into nature, get around people that support you and care about you and want to see you live your best life, and also honor you for your service, like, and for your continued service. And I think, Tim, you're an absolute role model for that in your 3.5 decades of service, and then what you're doing now to be able to give folks like us the opportunity and a platform to share our stories. Like, I really appreciate you for that.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. We're going to wrap up in just a minute, but I want to, if you don't mind, and this is just, I'm thinking about this, is you have a new role with the foundation, and you mentioned to me about Kevin Sousa.
Yeah.
And if, to recognize and honor him, can you just share a little bit about him?
Oh man. Yes. And Kevin Kevin is just a supreme being of epic proportions who was full of life, full of zeal, full of talent, full of just complete epicness. He was like larger than life, in his physical stature, in his amazingly flowing locks of hair in his, he was a professional musician in addition to being a licensed marriage family therapist, has just the most amazing wife, and live the dream of being able to provide Stoke and the love of the ocean and the healing powers of the ocean with his community and music, and so Kevin ran a private practice out of South Bay area, and was our clinical director for the foundation. He passed away last summer due to a tumor that he had from melanoma cancer. And it had come back really aggressively. And Kevin always gave us permission to just be in the moment, and to know that it's okay, and to know that we're all going to transition at some point from these physical bodies, but whatever your belief is, like, it's part of this process, and life is so incredibly beautiful, and we have so much to be grateful for. And he was a mentor and a best friend to everybody who connected with him. And so, yeah, it's big shoes to fill, being, sharing the role of director with Kevin. And he always used to say that the perfect wave is the one you're on.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that we will always have from Kevin, in that idea of, you can wish for whatever, but if it's right in front of you and you're in the moment and you're living life as it's happening right now, that's the perfect wave. That's living. That's how to do it. And he was such an amazing example of, like, the personification of that. And so he's done just so much for the community of Manhattan Beach, and for the life force of it in a positive way, and for the foundation that we're really honored to share in his legacy, and to have him, forever live in our hearts, within the foundation and in the ocean.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. And no doubt he's missed. He will be continue to be missed. But you said tough shoes to fill. I think they have the right person for the job with you. So
thank you
in doing that, Nick. That's a big
that.
role. But
well, you may think otherwise after next week. We'll see. We'll put it to the,
I'm looking forward to it regardless.
Put it to the test next week. It'll be really a joy to spend time with you on the sand, and for you to see really what you've helped create, and in segueing what we do for veterans in this role with first responders. I have so much respect for anyone who wants to wear a uniform and to protect and to serve our own communities, in an effort to make the world a better place. It means so much to me. So if I can give the gift of surfing and to share the Stoke for the betterment of anybody's life, I'm really honored to do that.
Fantastic. I appreciate it. But I want to say that for you, to you, no doubt, proud parents, no doubt, proud wife, proud kids of their dad. But, for the profession you chose, number one, to serve others, really, your current profession, the fact that you decided to join the military and became a Marine, an officer, degree, deployed, you served your country, and the work that you're doing now, with the Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation. I want to thank you for doing all of those. Thank you. You continue to reach others, and no doubt, selfless, with in the work you do. And I just want to say thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege to finally, get this done. It was well worth the wait. Trust me when I say that. and keep doing what you're doing, no doubt. And again, I really appreciate it. We're going to put some information down below in the notes for the Jim Miller Memorial Foundation.
Awesome.
Some things about you in there as well. And looking forward to meeting you next week. So for everything, thank you very much.
Likewise, Tim, thank you so much for being you. And I'm really excited to I feel like I'm just getting started, which is a really cool feeling. And no matter what happens next, that's a great feeling to go into life with. So I'm honored to be on this journey with you.
Yeah,
it's gonna be awesome.
Really looking forward to it. That it's finally, that is kicking off next week. And trust me, for the first, I mean, obviously with the veterans and the Marines, for the first responders, this is gonna be life-changing for a lot of people. So I'm looking forward to it. And there's big things to come, but the foundation is going to reach a lot of people in a positive way. So thank you, and I appreciate your time.
All right, we'll see you in the water.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. Take care.